Well, welcome to the David Donnan podcast. We are very excited for this episode. We are going to be talking with Alan Cason. Pastor Allen is an elder in the South Georgia Conference of the Global Methodist Church. He has been in ministry for 2 decades. He is a graduate of the University of Georgia and the Candler School of Theology. He has an awesome wife, Kristen, and they have three beautiful children. I'm really excited to share with Alan. We've lived around each other in ministry for a while. He's always been a great friend, more of a mentor. I'm always calling and asking him, hey, what about this? Or have you thought about how the calendar looks like this? And so he's always been super graceful. And I thought it would be great for him to have a conversation with us about what does it mean to be Global Methodist? And then for the first time, really, we've had several conversations about the Global Methodist Church, but we want to ask what particularly about the South Georgia Global Methodist Church is awesome. Before I welcome him, though, I do want to say if you're looking for a Bible believing evangelical Wesleyan church, come join us at Glenville Methodist Church. We'd love to have you for worship each Sunday at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. So, Alan, what's up, man?
Nothing much. I heard the sky is up. That's what I heard.
No, awesome dad joke to start us off. Now, I said
Yes.
you went to Georgia. I have no clue. What was your major at the University of Georgia?
My major was child and family development. I started as a pre-cal, oh no, not pre-cal, pre-psych major. Had no idea what I wanted to do. Took one semester of Spanish, had the summer break and had to come back to Spanish 10 or 201, 102, whatever you want to call it. And after the first week, we were going to start learning we were going to start speaking only in Spanish. And I knew at that moment I needed to find a major with not, I didn't have to have a foreign language. So at the time I'd gotten the call to ministry. And so I decided, well, I'm going to be dealing with children and families. So let's get a degree in that. So
So you
that's what,
knew when you chose that you were probably going to ministry. You were like serving a church like at age 12, right?
seems like it. No, actually my freshman year of Georgia, I received the call to ministry. I was in English 101 and the teacher had us have a journal, keep up journal during the semester. And she would sometimes give us an assignment out of class, and sometimes she would give us an assignment in class. And she did that um, one day and in class. And at the end of class, she said, I want you to write about what you want to accomplish while you're at the University of Georgia. And so I started writing about how I wanted to be involved in the Wesley Foundation, which the University of Georgia has a huge Wesley Foundation and I attended, but it was large. It was large, so large that I kind of felt swallowed. So that actually didn't manifest, but um, I ended my journal entry with saying that I can't imagine doing anything else but serve my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it was as if the Lord was writing those words or speaking those words to me, and it just it's like the Lord was like, "Well, are you serious? Do you really mean that?" And so I just went through a discernment process and decided, that discernment process felt the call to pastoral ministry. So
That's awesome. And so as a freshman, you got your first appointment?
no, so I didn't. I served. I was a youth director in my high school church where my dad served in Sandersville during my junior year of college.
Okay.
Um, Served a year co-leading while they were in between youth directors, and then got married of May of '04 and took four churches in June of '04 in the big city of Adrian, Georgia, and actually drove 2 hours one way, so 4 hours round trip twice a week to Athens to finish up my senior year at Georgia. So
So one of the other things is I knew Alan's dad before I knew him. His dad's a Methodist minister too.
yeah,
And so, how do you think growing up as a preacher's kid, a PK as they're called, how did that influence you and affect your call into ministry?
well, yeah, no, it's probably why I am. I grew up swearing up and down that I was not called, never going into ministry because everybody would ask you that. Um, I'm a Methodist because of that. Yeah, had a huge impact. So
So you're a Methodist because of that, but I think being, I was exposed to Methodism as a 4 or 5 year old when my family started worshiping as a Methodist Christians. But that's not always the case. I mean, we know plenty of people who are like, hey, I've left Methodism and now I'm Catholic, or now I go to a Reformed church, or I'm a non-denominational pastor. And some of our like
Yeah.
biggest church plants in South Georgia have been like launched out of Methodist churches that become like something totally different. You I mean, maybe your family would be mad at you, but I mean, there has to be a reason why you're Methodist and didn't choose to be some other flavor of Christianity.
Yeah, sure. I think, and it's not alone. We're not alone in this, but I think it's the idea of God's grace and power that first comes to us before we are able to come to God, and that it continues to transform us into the likeness of Christ. A call for us to live a holy life. That transformation is possible. Um, I think that call to scriptural holiness, that is the hallmark of the Wesleyan movement, is um, the going on to perfection. That's why, that it's not just about a one-time decision, but it's a lifelong decision. Um, yeah, I mean, that's, add in our view of the sacraments and the whole connectional system. That's why. So,
It's very cool. You hit like all the right buzzwords.
oh yeah, I
You had
did. I've been
a little
trained,
bingo.
man.
Yes. Yes,
But
you did.
it's also true though. Like it's real. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit on some of the high points too, for sure. So in the Wesleyan movement, there's this emphasis on holiness. There's this emphasis on being connected to other churches, like you said, scripture, holiness. Um, but inside the Wesleyan movement, there are different branches. I mean, me and you both were in one branch of Methodism, but now we are in the South Georgia Conference of the Global Methodist Church. I went in before you, so I'll claim that I'm your
yeah,
senior in this area. But I
yeah.
remember, I was in a first wave of churches to join. And so I was like the only young pastor at the time. And once I heard that you were coming, I was so relieved because like you are a leader in Methodism and in the South Georgia Methodist movement. And so it was so good to have you come and have your church come. Why'd you end up in the Global Methodist Church?
Well, it started as a desire to stay Wesleyan and to stay connected. There,
What does
lead.
connection? Let's define
Yeah,
connection, because
sure.
I think if anything, that's a term that's becoming even more important as Methodism continues to branch into different directions.
Yeah, I think it's the idea that we're not alone, and it's not a connection based on simply that we're all giving financially to the same organization. It's that we're not in ministry by ourselves. I think um, there's just a strong movement today about, standalone, non-denom, um, even other denominations where they really don't answer to anybody outside of their local church. Um, um, I I appreciate the being connected. I appreciate being belonging to something bigger than myself, in my local church, and my local church is a part of that. Um, yeah, that means support, but we're also supporting them. It just means that we're there for each other. So
Mhm. It does. It means we're there for each other and in different ways too. So we do partner together to do ministry together. We partner together to conference together to have worship service with all the churches and pastors in South Georgia. And then also there's clergy accountability. You kind of touched on that a little bit. That's really important for us because I mean, it can be like a discipline thing, like we get out of hand, and that's really good to have somebody say, "Hey, come back in," or even, who can help us make a call if this person's no longer qualified for ministry. It's not just up to the local
mhm.
church. So there are so many reasons to be connected. I like to think of it as like, and it was something that John Wesley was really big on, of having the Methodists connected to each other. I like to think of it as churches go out and they're independent. It's kind of like if you quit going to the gym, like you can't tell like one day you quit going to the gym or even a week you quit going to the gym, but 6 months, a year, 5 years, like you're going to look totally different if you were in a really good shape. And the same way in Methodism, I mean, part of our polity, part of our theology is that we are connectional. And so if you walk out of a connectional system, you might not look very different. There might not be much that happens in your church. But over 6 months, over a year, over 5 years, you're going to look totally different if you're just out there on your own. One of the stories that I like to tell is we went on a cruise and we went on like the cheapest Royal Caribbean, not Royal Caribbean, Carnival cruise we could go on, so even cheaper than Royal Caribbean. And we went to this free public beach at one of the stops in the Bahamas, and I was wearing a Tattnall County hat. That's the county I live in. And somebody in the water, like where all these cruise ships are, is like, "Are you from Tattnall County?" I said, "Yes." And they lived about 20 miles away from us, but we had the same barber and everything. And so I said, since I met somebody and invited them to church, I can reimburse myself for that whole cruise for my family. And of course, when I tell people that, they laugh because that would be extremely inappropriate. But if you're just a church by yourself, like, and the preacher tries to pull something like that, like,
Yeah.
I mean, most people who serve in church leadership are very sweet Christian people, and confronting your pastor is difficult. And even knowing what to confront your pastor on is challenging. So to be able to have a structure of elders and supervising elders and a board ordained ministry and people who can say, "Hey, this just seems a little like we something that we're struggling with. Can you help us, give us some verbiage of how to talk to our preacher about this? Or is this anything we need to even bring up?" And so I think having those structures in place, really, it's like when you play video games, I play video games with my kid a lot. Like you can set it on easy mode or hard mode. Like when you're in a connectional system, it's like playing it on easy mode. Like you're able to say, "Hey, I need help with this. Give me some hints on the best way forward."
Yeah, no, I think it's really important for pastors because I think it's easy ministry. Just we can have our own silos and get lonely. You can get caught in destructive behavior, and you just it's just it's so important for pastors to have other pastors surrounding them.
Yeah. So we are in, as I said before, the South Georgia Conference of the Global Methodist Church. The Global Methodist Church is several conferences from all over the world, and we are in the group that goes from Augusta kind of over to Macon into South Georgia. That's kind of our geographical area that we serve in. What particularly is positive or cool about being in this area and what God's doing in our conference?
Well, it's the place where most of my friends are. Most of us came over from a previous denomination, so um, we all know each other, and we've known each other for a long time, and so there's a comfort in that. And it's just always good to be together with each other. And then it's the place that I grew up. It's the area that I've always known, and so um, we've got Epworth by the Sea, which is I heard is a great place to be.
True.
And we got these just South Georgia. I love South Georgia. So um, I'm excited about the move of the Spirit taking place in our conference. There's a unity behind going deeper with Jesus, and so I just think I think it's great.
Yeah. I personally am just overwhelmed about the emphasis seems to be more on spiritual formation. And I think that's a little bit of we've learned and cultures kind of learned too, like not to have these big bureaucracies, these big institutions sometimes don't function as good as they could have. And so when we get together as a conference, I mean, you were up there, you helped organize part of worship and introduce one of the preachers one night. I mean, it really is focused on bringing glory to God. Now, there's a little bit of business that we do, but the emphasis seems to be on
Yeah.
the men and women growing deeper in their relationship with the Lord.
Well, yeah, and I'm on the discipleship team, and we're trying to make it an emphasis of the conference to make disciples, getting back to the basics. And it's hard to believe. I feel like we've gone a generation or two or more in the local church without really understanding what the mission is. Even though we've known that the mission is to make disciples, like what does that even mean?
Mhm.
And so to see the light bulb go off on a few folks and just to get laity and clergy trained, yeah, that's exciting to me.
Yeah, and some of it is our fault as just managers of institutions. Like we're like, hey, we got to get somebody on this leadership committee or this, administrative committee.
Sure.
And so it's good to have like from the top down, from our president pro tem Jay Hansen to the leadership team, um, to really say our emphasis is on bringing back that discipleship and really structurally outside of maybe walk to Emmaus's, like there has not been a very like formal um, discipleship
No,
process.
no, no. So that excites me.
Um, is there anything particularly special about South Georgia? There's all these other conferences doing great things, and I'm on some of their newsletters. I'm seeing things, but other than your best friend David Donnan being in the conference, like what do you think is something special about South Georgia?
Well, I think we have great leadership. Think again, I think that the emphasis on making disciples is going to be a huge thing. Um, Getting our laity involved. I think we're leading the way with the certified lay ministry training.
Mhm.
So, yeah, no, I think there's a lot of great things happening.
I like to hear when people come from outside of the conference into our conference, like y'all had Matt Reynolds come and preach, and he was just talking about the spiritual depth, and he's been here. What this might be his fourth time coming to South Georgia that I know of to do a discipleship or preach.
Yeah,
Um,
be in the local churches. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's cool to hear him. Last year, David Watson, Leah Hitty Gregory, just some of these big leaders. So it's really cool to hear them like kind of point out what's unique. One of the unique things, this might not even be on the top of your mind, is for the churches in South Georgia, most denominations have a required amount of giving, and the Global Methodist Church is asking, I think, for 1% or 1.5% of your revenue to support the Global Methodist Church at the global level. I hope I said that clear. And then in South Georgia, I'm on the business committee, so I'm still championing this really strong. Like we have zero required giving. And our last nomination, it was sometimes 10, 11, 12% of what you would take in annually, you would send out. And we still, our church is very generous, but I love that we've decided like, hey, you don't require your church members to give. We encourage it, and that's what we're doing as a conference too. And it's nice. Like I know eventually the odds are this will go away and we'll have a certain required amount to give. But I'm like at Georgia Southern after the kickoffs, we say one more time. We just want to kick it off one more time and play one more time. Well, I just want to go one more year at 0% required giving
Yeah.
and rely on people's generosity.
Yeah, and what's cool about that is that just like just last night had a finance committee meeting, and we were able to approve some pretty large giving to some local ministries in town, um, and we have the freedom to do that because our budget's been is not taken up with
Mm-hmm.
just this large amount of giving that we were required to give,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still able to give and support the our South Georgia conference. So
Mm-hmm. So I've said a couple times, Alan, you're a leader, and one of the ways that you're a leader is you have been elected to go to General Conference to represent the South Georgia Conference. Our denomination, we elect people. We have a global body that meets every 6 years. They're going to have their first meeting this year, and then a couple years have another meeting. They'll be on a 6 year rotation where they set polity, where they worship, where they um, do any of the big church work that needs to be done. So, Alan, this is your first time as a delegate to a general conference. What do you hope to see happen? What do you think might happen?
well, technically, I'm a reserve delegate, so I'm actually not going unless anybody gets some sniffles or anything like that. So,
So
but
you're
I've been a
still, yeah, you're
yeah,
still in all the meetings, right?
yeah, I'm still on all the meetings, and I think the big thing um, is just to have a plan for our bishops. I think that's the big thing. And there's a um, couple of different plans out there, thoughts process. The transitional leadership team has a plan. Some other conferences have a plan. Sort of basically a difference between, do we want residential bishops or do we want general superintendents? And um, I think maybe we all have our preference either way. I just hope that we come out with a plan that's unified, and then we kind of, and it'll take some tweaking and get whichever one we do, but um, we want to. I think we want to be able to hold our bishops accountable. I want our bishops to be teaching and inspiring. I was inspired by Bishop Jones at our annual conference. Just very simple but direct teaching and expectations for pastors and churches. So I really appreciated that. So yeah, I just think we got to come out of there with a plan for what bishops look like.
Yeah. Do you know what I think about the bishops? Which one I'm leaning towards?
I think you want residential bishops.
So I wrote in Firebrand arguing for residential, and I told Bishop Jones this because I know he's for the general superintendents. I said, I'm leaning more towards general superintendents now. I think my personal preference is still like I know who I would make bishop over South Georgia if somebody gave me the magic wand, and
Yeah.
um, it wouldn't be me if that's what people are thinking. But I think also the question we got to ask is if we get it wrong, what's the easiest to undo? And if we create like 45 bishops and then we say we don't want bishops anymore, like
Yeah.
they're gonna
Yeah.
like everybody doesn't want to like lose their job. And then the darker side is that nobody wants to give up power
Yeah.
too. And so I don't know, I'm more agnostic, I
There's a
guess.
lot that I like about the general superintendency. Just the fact that, I mean, Scott, just Bishop Jones coming in and leading the way he did. He's not here all the time. He's an outsider, so to speak,
Mhm.
but he was still able to lead and to inspire as the um, sort of the head of the church.
Yeah.
And so that yeah, and it would be the easiest to correct or to tweak moving forward. So
I like also like it gave you a little bit of a connection because, you know, maybe 20 other conferences have heard a similar sermon from Bishop Jones. And so there is a little bit of unity of the message versus if you just have a South Georgia bishop and then he's giving
yeah,
his South Georgia theology on Wesleyanism. And then Alabama, they're hearing their thing. And in Texas, they're hearing their thing. So to be able to have a little bit more cohesiveness. And I know like if you had, like all the different bishops, you still have somebody in charge of them and they would have a message. But how many people are going to like go and find another message from a bishop and listen to it?
yeah,
Like it's just nice to have one
yeah,
to come into your place.
yep.
Do you have any other thoughts, big thoughts about the general Global Methodist Church?
No, I'm just excited about the growth. Praying for our brothers and sisters who um are wanting to become a part of it.
Yeah.
And all in the U.S. and outside. So it's exciting to hear how it's growing. And uh, I like the pace in which it's growing.
Hmm.
So no, it's just exciting.
Yeah. It really is. If somebody in the U.S. or outside the U.S. was thinking about joining the Global Methodist Church, whether from another Wesleyan branch or maybe they've been independent, and they want to be a part of something, what would you say are some things to consider?
Yeah, I would think, and I would say, obviously the connection, being tethered together. We're better together than apart. If you are Wesleyan, I think part of being Wesleyan is to be connected to a bigger body than just the local church. Um, I think it is spirit filled and spirit led. Um, no doubt about it. At least in South Georgia,
Yeah.
I can testify. So, and and listen, what I don't understand the what's the downside?
Yeah.
Um, there's no trust clause. So if you get in and you're like, this isn't for me,
Hmm.
was it 3 months notice or whatever, and you're out. And
Yeah.
so I don't really understand the downside.
Yeah.
Um, so come on.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to shift and talk about your local church. You've been at Metter
Yeah.
Methodist Church for 8 years now. You're in year eight,
Yep. And I'm in year 9 actually.
year
So
nine. So that's very cool.
been there 8.
And your last appointment was 7 years. So that's kind of unusual. That's might be where we're trending to
Yeah.
having longer appointments.
Yeah.
What do you think is the fruit that you see being somewhere in years 5, 6, 7, 8?
Um, well, it's just trust, I have trust. You just have built up relational equity over time. And so there's a trust. Yeah, it's just good. It's great to stay at one place a long time, especially for if you got a family.
Yeah.
So it's been great.
Do you think being a preacher's kid who had to move growing up, that's made you want to set some deep roots?
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it for sure. Although, even though some of those moves were harder as I got older, if I hadn't have moved to Sandersville, Kristen and I would never have been married. So there's fruit that comes from it, of course. But I also see how my children are flourishing by staying in one place for a while.
That's what, if I ever have to move my kids, I'll say, "Do you ever want to get married? This is what you have to do to find your spouse." What
Yeah.
about what makes Metter such a special? I lived in the county right above you, and I loved my time there. To you, what makes your area and then your church such a special place?
Well, everybody knows we got this motto called "Everything's better in Metter."
Hmm.
And I think it is true. Well, I don't know if everything's better, but I mean, like, everything's really good in Metter.
Hmm.
And there's just a strong knit, close community. That people say, um, no matter when you came here, if you weren't born here, you're not from here. So, and sometimes that's viewed negatively, but there's just people who've just grown up here all their lives,
Hmm.
and that makes it special. We have a unique. We're on the exit of I-16, so we kind of have an I-16 Metter and a downtown Metter, which makes things interesting. You don't go to the exit. You don't go out to eat on the exit on a holiday weekend on like a Friday or a Monday or something like that. It's just crazy.
Yeah,
Um, no, it's just good. We have a strong school system and with godly leaders, and so it makes sharing the gospel and living out your faith in the local schools um, a lot easier than in some other places.
hmm,
And I try to remind my folks that often that you'll listen to the news and you'll hear this, but that's not here.
hmm.
Um, and so there's a lot of opportunities here. I think at our church, I think we've begun to have a real focus for making disciples. That has become my heart over the last 2 years, and that one-on-one, that small group discipleship that is reproducible, that you go and then you disciple others, um, has become it's become my heart, and I think it's becoming a part of the DNA of the church. So that's exciting.
That's very cool. One of the big things that preachers do is actually preach. So I was just curious, what's your preaching method like? What's the rhythm to your week like as
Yeah.
far as prepping and getting ready to get up and lead on
Oh
Sunday?
yeah. Well, you're always, I try to plan months ahead, but I don't always. I'm usually writing that week. I preach from a manuscript, but I don't necessarily. I don't read from the manuscript, but I
Hmm.
preach from it. And I'm always tweaking throughout the week. Um, I think I'm becoming more of a teacher in my preaching than
Hmm.
just straight preaching. I think people need to know the word, and not necessarily my congregation. Just our culture's not as biblically literate as it used to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think people are hungry. Like when I have more of a teaching side to my sermon, I'll get more, not just compliments like, "Preacher, that was good." It's more like, "Preacher, I didn't know that about the
yeah,
Samaritans," or
yeah,
they really want somebody to explain it to them on a certain level. But I think also people are just hungry to learn too.
sure, sure, absolutely. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of I'm not going to tell you I spend a whole crazy amount of hours during the week. But I certainly it's the focus each week for sure.
Yeah, I think, well, and also the thing about the hours, it's so hard to quantify because you might sit down and work on a manuscript for an hour,
Yeah.
but then you're laying down at night and you're like, oh, that would be a
Yeah.
cool way to say that or a
Yeah.
way to turn the phrase. Like it's like always cooking.
Yeah. It'd probably take me an hour to just write it out.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's always cooking. Like it's, if, um, this week, Acts 23, Paul says that the Lord was near him, stood near him when he was dealing with the Sanhedrin, and take courage, the Lord is near, and stood with Paul. And I just think, well, how's the Lord standing near me? How's the Lord standing near you? How does that
Mhm.
look in your own life? Blah, blah, blah. You just always thinking about that. Whatever it is that week, it's always rolling.
And
So
then you'll call somebody to pray with them, and you're like, I'm going to encourage them and tell them that. And then they end up telling you something even stronger about,
right,
the Lord
yeah,
standing near, and you're like,
yeah.
you text them later, can I use that in the sermon? All right, we are about to enter our lightning round of our final questions. But before we do, if people want to follow some of your content, you got a podcast that's pretty popular. You want to share about that?
Yeah, so we have the Podakesis podcast. You take catechesis, which is a way of teaching the faith through questions and answer. You take podcast, so podakesis. We did a great thing by making our own word so that people couldn't spell it. But Podakesis podcast is me, Brett Maddox, and Jim Morrow. We are not active right now, but we have several years of content up on the web for you to check out.
Y-
So we'd love for you to do that.
Yeah, and if you want to know like some Wesleyan stuff, I mean, they do a great job, and then their guests are some of the top Wesleyan names and faces and scholars, and so yeah, very very cool. I guess y'all kind of really slowed down once all the Marvel movies stopped being as good. Y'all don't have as much content to talk about.
Yeah, it's a I don't know. It happened at the same time. I'm not sure. That and Star Wars.
Yeah, well, yeah, that definitely took a nosedive too. All right, here come the final five questions. These are a rapid lightning round at the end of every podcast we ask people. What is your favorite book that you have read outside of the Bible?
Right now, The Master Plan of Evangelism by
Oh,
Robert
Coleman.
Coleman. I
Yeah,
almost forgot.
yeah.
Um, and it's really should be called The Master Plan of Making Disciples. But it's Jesus's 8 steps for how he chose and discipled the disciples to continue his ministry once he was gone. So
What is your favorite spiritual formation practice?
the YouVersion Bible app, yearly Bible reading that you can set up on there and that you can set up with friends so that you can hold each other accountable. I've been doing it. This is my 3rd year doing it. And I've got 8 other guys in my church that we're reading together. And you can actually comment and you can actually see that if they're reading, they can see if you're reading. And so you can hold each other accountable.
So
So
let me ask you this. This is supposed to be rapid fire, but I got to slow down and ask this. When you have your quiet time, are you firing up the app, then reading a physical Bible, or are you just looking on your phone, or
So
a mixture?
typically, well, sometimes it's a mixture, but typically it's on all on the phone.
Okay,
So
that's cool. I
and with that app, it it can audio too. So
Oh, the
sometimes,
audio on certain translations, and it's really
yeah.
cool.
So I can get my reading in which sounds really horrible, I guess, as saying that, but while I'm driving or
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that might be a controversial statement if somebody says I read like Moby Dick and they listen to it, but in scripture it's different because like the majority of people consume scripture
yeah,
audibly. Like
it
most
was
people didn't
passed
know how to
down
read.
audibly. Absolutely, yeah.
So you're a
They read
traditionalist.
Paul's letters. They read Paul's letters. Somebody would read them to the church,
Yeah.
and they heard them. So,
All right.
yep.
What early church father or theologian you would most like to have a conversation with?
I mean, I went easy, John Wesley. So,
Okay. I figured. What would you ask John Wesley about if you could ask him like just
oh,
one
yeah.
or two questions?
Um. Well, it's interesting because we know a lot of his thoughts from his journals.
Yeah.
Um. How bad was it when you left Georgia?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know. So.
we were out at the Fort, is it Fort Sumter in Savannah? Where
No, I don't know. I can't
the,
remember.
they have like a monument where they landed, and he preached a sermon like right when they landed. And we went out in the woods, and I told my son, we were both checking out the military fort there, and I said, some of the same mosquitoes and sand gnats that bit John Wesley, their ancestors could be biting us right now. So yeah, he didn't have a great time in
Yeah.
Savannah. All right, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Sanibel Island in Florida. It's on the western coast on the
Okay.
Gulf,
Yeah.
very south. Um, the place you will find the most seashells in your that you've ever seen. Now it got really torn up by a hurricane 3 4 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, actually tore down the bridge, the only bridge that gets to
Hmm.
the island. They like rebuilt it in record time, but Kristen and I have gone there several years in a row. She loves seashells, but it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, the we live on the East Coast, but and it is a long drive to the Gulf Shore, but it's worth
It's
it.
eight
I don't know.
hours. It's 8 hour drive. Yeah, for sure.
I think it depends on if your kids are getting along while you're driving, or if you're just going with your spouse, it might be much more
We've
enjoyable.
mostly just gone by ourselves.
Yes, yes, there you go. All right, final question. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Learn what making disciples really is and start doing it. Um, like I said, I feel like well, I didn't say this, but I feel like I've wasted almost 18 years of my ministry, and I know that's not true, but I think you and I were taught that ministry was one thing, and it's really not. And so the focus should always be on making disciples, whether we're a pastor or a lay person. Um, and so that's what I would tell them. So,
Yeah, I think I would have something similar too, of like I would go back and tell myself to just go all in on God. Like, because there's been so much of my ministry that was about, hey, do I have killer graphics? Am I funny enough? Am I cool enough? And like it's all just about the discipleship. Like God's gonna do what
yep.
God's gonna do, and like we just get to have a front seat to it.
And lean into the Holy Spirit. Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Any other final thoughts you have?
No, man, it's been great.
It really has been a pleasure. I know you're super busy, so I appreciate you taking time. Thanks, Alan.
You're welcome.